Hi, and welcome to Sense in the City, Athens, a podcast presented by Alexia Amvrazi. This podcast is created to introduce you to a multitude of places, people, and things in the Greek capital, Athena, named after the goddess of wisdom, to lead you to discover the city through your senses in fresh, evocative, and even downright surprising ways. In this episode, I interviewed Donald Robertson, who's a world-renowned expert on the relationship between modern psychotherapy, particularly cognitive behavior therapy or CBT, and classical Greek and Roman philosophy, which is a pretty unique mix. It all started out for him when, after years of working as a CBT therapist and teaching worldwide, running workshops and seminars, and having also written 6 books and numerous articles, he started to combine more actively his studies of philosophy with Stoic thought by joining the Stoic Week. You can find out much more about it in the interview and in the show notes that follow. Now, Donald and I met at sunset time on the lush and deeply historic Pnyx hill near the Acropolis, and during our chat we explored Athens through the sights, sounds, smells, textures and experiences that we had there and then, as well as delving into his personal rapport with this city, a city he's been discovering more and more deeply since he first visited it 3 years ago when I first met him. Now, you can find, as I said, all this information in more depth in our show notes, but for now, let's move on to my meeting with Donald. So I'm just walking up the cobblestone part of the path that leads off the Athenian Street, and it's basically a cobblestone path lined with olive trees and pine trees. It's really beautiful. As soon as you step in here, you're entering a different vibe completely. And I'm going to walk up to the legendary Socrates prison. Well, that's what it's called. But real archaeologists, real experts in ancient Greece say that it's not at all Socrates' prison. It's not where Socrates went to die and to drink the poison. I'm going to go and meet Donald Robertson over there now. He should be, yes, I spot him now. I'm walking on this dirt road, which is really dry from the summer sun and full of rocks and pine cones, and there's trees all around me. I hear the cicadas, and I see Donald standing outside this amazing spot, which is like a sort of cave with bars, and it's got 2 holes, 2 doors, sort of 2 doorways, and all these metal bars. And here he is, and I'm going to ask him, after I say hello, of course, the important question. Hello, Donald.
Hi, Alexia. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you. I hope I'm not too late.
No, I just on time. We're here at the fake Socrates prison.
I didn't even get to ask my question because
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, is there any truth to the fact that the concept that this was Socrates' prison?
I don't think so. I think there's no, well, as far as I'm aware, there's no evidence that this was the prison where Socrates was put. There's a kind of tradition that it was referred to as the prison of Socrates, but I think the latest belief is that Socrates was actually imprisoned in a prison house in the Agora, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just because it was an old building and it looks kind of creepy or whatever. Like, at some point, people had decided over the years that they thought that's what it might have been.
I know one thing they did use this for much, much later on in history, in more recent years, during the Second World War. Apparently it was used to house the treasures of the Archaeological Museum during the Nazi occupation, and there was a big concrete wall covering it. But I still don't know, what happened here thousands of years ago.
Well, who knows? I mean, if it was maybe some kind of dwelling place, or a shop or something. I like to imagine that something special and magnificent happened here. Maybe there was an oracle housed here, or maybe somebody was just selling hot dogs.
Ancient hot dogs.
We'll never really know. There's not a lot of evidence here. All we know is there's some kind of caves, and I think there's a cistern, and there's bars in front of it now. But it's a very interesting, kind of slightly spooky looking ruin.
How would you describe the whole place around here? I mean, it is a special place, isn't it? Do you feel anything, especially knowing that we're going towards Pnyx Hill? Actually, we could set off right now.
In that direction.
Yeah, and that it's considered the place where democracy, the process of democracy began, although it was a sexist process, of course, because no women were allowed, because they weren't citizens. But anyway, let's overlook that. So how do you feel being here in this part of Athens?
Well, I think it's a very historic location, and it's a very scenic location. It's got many views of the Acropolis from different points in this little range of hills. And it's important to the history of Athenian politics, as you mentioned. We're near the Philopappus monument as well, which is, I guess, what would you say, a very eye-catching monument. You can see it from all over the place because it's right at the top of one of the highest points. You can see from the city centre. And it smells quite fragrant here as well, and we have this lovely sound of the crickets.
It smells of dry leaves and dry earth.
And there are animals
kind of
here, tortoises.
Yes.
Turtles, chelonas.
Yeah, chelonas, that's right.
And they hunt in packs at night, so you have to be very careful. They'll get you, I'm told. They're faster than they look.
So, Donald, tell me a little bit about your connection to Athens, because you first came here for the very first time in your life, although your work centers around Stoicism 3 years ago, that's right?
Yeah, I think it was around about 3 years ago.
And you're very connected to it already.
Yeah, like
what is it about Athens that evokes you to come back again?
Well, I
and
love
again?
Greek philosophy, and I benefited a lot from studying Greek philosophy over the years. And so I wanted to come to Athens and learn more about the culture and the history. And so I came, and it seemed very familiar to me. Like, I think to many people throughout the centuries, starting with the Romans, perhaps, like, people learned about Greek philosophy and culture, they're influenced by it, maybe didn't get a chance to come here, then eventually came here, and they had this kind of deja vu feeling that they're finally getting to experience things that they'd previously only read about in books and poems.
So what are the senses of Athens that you the senses that you associate with Athens the most?
The senses, the taste of Greek food, many tastes of Greek food of all sorts, and krasi.
Is it this way?
And
yes, I think so.
Go this way, I think so.
We're going through a little gate now, and there's a big dog, but he's without
friendly one.
He looks friendly, yes, like most of the strays of Athens. Anyway, sorry I interrupted you.
I think the smells of Athens as well. There's the smell of the different plants that grow in the hillsides, and the sensation of the sun as well. Recently it's been quite scorching. And so these are some of the things that I associate.
What about textures? Are there any textures that you
Yes, there are. Yes, I'd like to complain about that, Alexia, because some of these paving stones are quite slippy.
I was actually scared my sandals would
smooth.
be slippery too.
Yeah, sometimes, and the hills are very steep, and sometimes I wonder how these old ladies, the yayas, don't slide down them, like, because they have to walk up these steep hills with their shopping bags from the supermarket from Alphavita, and there's not a lot of grip on some of the paving slabs.
So we are walking up the paving slabs now, and we chose this specific hour for a reason, because it's almost sunset time. The sun sets in about half an hour, 20 minutes, and it's a full moon tonight. And why are we here? What can you see right now? Wow.
Suddenly we round the corner. It's often the case in Athens that you just go round the corner, you suddenly see a gap between some streets, and you catch a glimpse of something historic. And we can see many things, because there are many things very close together in Athens. So we see the Areopagus with a lot of people clambering on it, and we see the Acropolis.
My God, there's a lot of people on there actually.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of people on there.
And I think they often have like little music performances up there.
Oh,
as
is that
well.
what it is?
Well, sometimes people bring
Something's
out
happening,
guitar
an
or
event.
yeah, little gatherings.
I
And
mean, see Luca Vetus.
right behind it, yes.
And we're feeling the cool breeze because we're on top of one of the hills.
You haven't mentioned this hugely impressive rock on my right, on our right-hand side.
The Acropolis.
Yes.
Oh, I did. You didn't hear me. I mentioned the Acropolis. I promise you. You can't
Okay.
miss it. Like, it's a temple to Athena, and yeah, like one of my interests is Stoic philosophy, and I recently noticed that one of my favourite philosophers is Marcus Aurelius, and the Stoics have this idea about viewing things from high above as a kind of contemplative practice. And Marcus Aurelius says that the mind of someone who does this rises above violent passions, he says, and becomes like an impenetrable citadel. And I thought Marcus Aurelius, although he's Roman, he writes like many educated Romans who were doing philosophy at the time. He writes in Greek, and it always bugged me. I wondered what the word was he used for impregnable citadel. And then I never got around to looking it up, and I looked up, and the word he uses, and I don't know why no one ever points this out in any of the books, is Acropolis. And there are many Acropoli, but I think he had in mind the Athenian Acropolis, because in another passage he talks about looking down upon all of the busyness of human affairs, marriages and divorces, and people trading things, and the clapping of tongues in law courts, he says, like, and seeing that from high above, so seeing it with a kind of certain amount of detachment. And he talks about looking down on agoras. And so one of the things that you see when you look down from the Acropolis in Athens is the agora, where Socrates was tried and executed, we believe. And it's a metaphor, therefore. So to me, the Acropolis is potentially a symbol of one of the main psychological techniques in ancient philosophy, which involves looking at things from a kind of elevated perspective and getting a sense of detachment towards them.
No, I asked you about how you describe Athens through the senses. How about Stoicism itself?
Well, we talked about this, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and I asked people about it, and I think Stoicism would be quite an earthy, down-to-earth philosophy. It's not like Plato's philosophy, which is quite mystical and metaphysical. Stoicism is quite grounded, so I guess it would have an earthy taste. And the Stoics, the early Greek Stoics, like their predecessors, the Cynic philosophers, ate lupin seeds and lentil soup. So I think Stoicism would taste like lentils. It's got a kind of earthy taste, and I feel like it might smell a bit of sweat, but in a good way.
Ew.
Sweaty lentils, like.
Anything else? No saving grace. Nothing fresh. Nothing zingy.
What would be I don't know if there's any real pleasant fragrances associated with Stoicism historically.
How did you become drawn to Stoicism and the smell of?
Well, it wasn't by the
lentils
smell. It
Sweat.
was because I was studying psychotherapy, and I
Let's
was
keep moving along, shall
studying philosophy. My first degree was in philosophy at Aberdeen, in Scotland, and I was training in psychotherapy and counselling, and so I was looking for a way to connect these two things together. And after 4 years of studying philosophy at university, I wasn't really getting very far. I was looking at existential philosophy and psychoanalysis. There's kind of overlap there, but it didn't really click for me. It seemed overly complicated. And then I stumbled across Stoic philosophy, and I realised it was the perfect combination of philosophy and psychotherapy and meditation or contemplative practices. So all the different things that I was interested in at the time I found combined in Stoicism.
And now Stoicism, as you mentioned recently, has become quite trendy, hasn't it? I mean, it's something that was practiced as a philosophy for 400 and I think 500 years, for almost. And now it's re-emerged in the modern world. first of all, I'm going to interrupt myself so we can describe where we've arrived now. Now we've arrived to the Pnyx hill, well, to the main part of the Pnyka hill, where there is this rock with steps on it. Is that where people used to get up and speak?
That's where they would speak, right there, where those steps are, as I understand it, and they would address thousands of people that would gather here. Because the one thing that we know about all Athenians, and this is true in the past and I think today as well, Alexia, is that they like to talk. I believe this is still true.
Don't know what you mean.
Yeah. So they like to go and have a good debate and listen to a good speech. And this obviously was a long time. This was before television and the internet, and so that was kind of partly how people got their entertainment.
What do you think Socrates would think of the internet?
Socrates would think that the internet was... I can tell you exactly what Socrates would think of the internet. He would think that it's like the gymnasia of ancient Athens, that it's full of things, diversions in a way. It's an opportunity to communicate with people, which is something that he would like. It's also like the agora, where you can mingle with lots of strangers, maybe visitors from all over the world in the agora. You communicate with the global community on the internet.
And is diversion a good thing?
Well, Socrates would think the danger is it's full of sophists, right? Socrates had a love-hate relationship with the sophists. They're what the kids today would call frenemies. So, like, I feel like whenever Plato's describing a sophist, Socrates isn't far away. He likes to hang around them, but he also has some beef with them. He thinks that they sound like philosophers, but they're not philosophers, because they tell people whatever they want to hear, whatever gets the biggest
like
round
the
of
New Age
applause.
gurus of today.
Yeah. Well, like literally, the internet works by people getting the most engagement on the posts or the most likes, and sometimes that means that people who say things that are true but boring disappear off the radar, and people who say things that are very sensational. And so people today complain a lot about how the media is fear-mongering and stoking hatred, but that's bound to happen in a culture where messages, posts and videos that get the strongest reaction from people get the most airtime and are rewarded. And the sophists were like that. They were attention seeking. They would literally compete for the biggest round of applause. And so Socrates thought the danger when you do that is that truth goes out the window and people start saying whatever they think the audience want to hear.
Right. Now, going on to a different topic, we've been globally facing this pandemic of COVID-19, and it's caused a huge psychological trauma, I would say, and social trauma to people that will probably take a long time to recover from, let alone understand. And I know with your work you combine, as you said, sort of the more psychological techniques with stoical philosophy. So what would be your sort of advice to people using those techniques in order to deal with the situations that they've been facing mentally and emotionally?
Well, there are many pieces of advice that the Stoics give, because our most famous text from the Stoics is the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, which he wrote during the middle of a pandemic called the Antonine Plague, which is far worse than the one that we're facing at the moment. It was a variant of smallpox, and it killed approximately 5 million people.
Just to let our listeners know, we're clambering down rocks right now, and we might just slip. I see myself slipping. Yep. Sorry.
So the Stoic philosophy kind of evolved in some ways in facing as a way of coping with similar threats in the ancient world. In lockdown, in the ancient world they had sieges, people were sent into exile, so they had kind of analogous experiences in a way that they were using philosophy to deal with. Philosophers were prone to getting sent into exile because they often upset
go this way?
Political leaders. They upset the government in various countries and tended to get exiled. And so dealing with exile, I thought, well, that seems very antiquated. We're not exiled today. And then I realised lockdown presents similar challenges to being an ancient philosopher sent into exile. So what type of advice do they give us? Well, the Stoics give us lots and lots and lots of advice. So we'd have to kind of pick selectively to give some examples. But for instance, they tell us, perhaps first and foremost, that we should try and view things more rationally and objectively. And in part that means watching the language that we use, so that we don't use sweeping over generalizations, we don't jump prematurely to conclusions, we don't use highly emotive language that's designed to stoke anger or fear or sadness.
Give me an example.
Well, I mean, for instance, my favourite example is I had a client once in therapy, and he'd given a presentation at work and it didn't go that well, and he was very anxious and very depressed and very upset about it. And I told him to kind of tell me what happened, and he said, well, someone really just tore a strip off me and they shot me down the flames, and I really wish the ground would just open up and swallow me whole, and
Wow.
it was just awful.
Okay.
That kind of stuff. And I explained to him this idea about suspending emotive language and strong value judgments, and I said, could you stick to the bare facts of what happened and describe it without any value judgments or any kind of metaphors at all, just in very plain objective language? And he said, I said such and such, and someone told me that they disagreed with me.
Oh.
And that was that sounded very different to me.
Yes.
Much less alarming. Yeah, but he'd put layer upon layer of rhetoric, really, emotive rhetoric on top of it that was bound. And language has evolved since the time of the ancient poets and orators to be a tool for firing up people's emotions.
Yeah, now we have emojis.
Yeah, we have emojis to do that for us. But the strange thing is, we use rhetoric on ourselves without even thinking about it. We use colourful metaphors, we use overgeneralizations, we use hyperbole and exaggeration, and it's like a dangerous psychological weapon in a way if we don't know what we're doing with it. And so people who are anxious and depressed will use anxious and depressive language to describe the situations they're facing. And the Stoics want us to try and get out of that habit and to learn to speak about things in a more matter-of-fact and objective way, and stick to the facts and be careful about the use of value judgments in particular.
Any other tips you would give?
Yeah, the other thing that the Stoics said, which was way ahead of their time, is that when we're upset about things, we tend to narrow down our focus of attention. So attention could be broad or it could be narrow, and the Stoics thought we should broaden our scope of attention. We should practice doing that every day. One way of doing that would be to imagine viewing things from high above, as I mentioned earlier, or imagine our place within the totality of space and time, for instance. And they were right, because we know now that when people are very angry or very anxious, they tend to focus on things like they're putting them under a magnifying glass. And when you broaden the scope of your attention, you can still be aware of the things that are upsetting you. Because you're also, in addition to that, aware of a lot of other things, it tends to dilute the emotional effect that it has.
Right. Okay. Those are two very, very invaluable parts of advice. So that's more like seeing the forest instead of seeing the tree. Is it the tree instead of the forest, or the forest instead of the tree?
You can't see the forest for the trees, is the expression. But looking at the bigger picture.
I suddenly was confused about what was more important, to focus on the tree or the broader thing. Right, now we've climbed on this. What is this part called? The something of Meliti, I think. These rocks that give us a totally different view of Attica. We're now looking out to the sea, and we have like the whole urban landscape and the mountains all around Athens, and then you can see the sea in the distance, and you actually can see boats in the sea with their lights twinkling. It's pretty magical and a very beautiful open view, and there's a few people perched on rocks here and there. This is also a lovely place to come and have like a glass of wine or two with some friends. And talking of wine, what did the Stoics say about overindulgence? Because that's another problem in our society today.
I think they believed that we should consume, either we should be water drinkers, as they said, and not drink wine, or we should consume it in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
So they seem to have different opinions about that. But moderation in all things was this fundamental of Greek philosophy in general, which really goes all the way back to some kind of pre-philosophy, perhaps, in the cult of Apollo at Delphi, where inscribed
Oh my God, I'm about to slip.
to the temple, it said "Maiden agan," or nothing too much, nothing in excess.
Like they say in modern Greek, the panton metron ariston.
Like the moderation is best in all things.
How's your Greek? Because I know you've been learning Greek, studying
Yeah.
Greek the last few years.
It's coming on very slowly. Talina kamudenina podi kala.
Oh, no.
But ala prospatho, I try, and it's getting there. So I'm very good at ordering coffee.
What does the Greek
In
language
Greek.
feel like and sound like to you? And
Oh, it's very different to speak Greek with a Scottish accent, and I believe that I may be the only person that speaks Greek with a Scottish accent. But I think Greek it was very confusing to me at first, because I knew a little bit of ancient Greek, although my ancient Greek was pretty rusty, and so I kept trying to pronounce modern Greek in an ancient Greek pronunciation, and so that confused me and everyone else for a while. But yeah, it seems to me to be quite a musical and poetic language, and it's interesting when you use a foreign language. I think it makes you think a little bit more about the words and phrases that you're using. In your native language, you tend to take idioms for granted, and when you're learning a new language, because everything seems a little stranger, you're using it a little bit more thoughtfully. It's good. It makes you mindful, self-aware. And the Stoics have a word for that. They call it prosochi, which is a word that's still used in Greek today, and you see everywhere.
attention!
Watch out for. I see it most often in signs that say prosochi skilos, or beware of the dog,
Yeah, beware of the dog.
as we would say in English. But Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, has a whole dialogue about this word and how it refers to paying attention to our own faculty of judgment, or the way that we use reason, and it's a kind of mindfulness concept of the Stoics.
So we've left Pnyx Hill and walked down the obviously much more noisy Dionysiou Paghitou Street. It's a Friday night. As we said, it's the full moon as well, so a lot of people are out and about. And we have to wrap up our chat now. I want you to please tell our listeners how to find you and find out more information about your teachings and your work and your books, of course. And you're also producing a graphic novel now.
Yeah, so they can find everything on my website, which is just donaldrobertson.name, and my latest book is called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. So it's available in 15 languages, including Greek, and I'm working on a graphic novel about Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism that's going to be out probably summer next year. And I'm writing a biography of Marcus Aurelius for Yale University Press. It'll be out like next year sometime as well. And yeah, like I've written 6 books, so they can find them all on my website if they're interested, and lots of articles and courses and stuff like that about Stoic philosophy.
Thank you so much for this wonderful chat and walk around this gorgeous Pnyka Hill and in the sunset time. And now you're off to try some Greek tastes.
Yeah.
Well, any idea what you're going to be eating?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe we'll have fava. Maybe we'll have tzatziki, taramasalata, kalamakia,
Kalamarakia.
kalamakia or kalamaki.
Kalamaki is kalamaki with meat stick. Yeah.
Kotopoulo kalamaki or kirano. Yeah.
Ωραία. Ένα κάποιο τελευταίο μήνυμα για τους ακροατές μας? Any last message for our listeners?
Oh, well, a message for your listeners about Stoic philosophy. What I usually say is a quote from the Latin poet Horace, which is pretty short and sweet. He was influenced by Stoic philosophy. He studied Stoic philosophy and he writes about it. is also influenced by Epicurean philosophy. And Horace says, "Dare to be wise," which I think is short and sweet and good advice.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a lovely dinner.
Thank you for joining Donald Robertson and me on our sometimes very slippery walk along the lushly scenic and deeply historic Pnyx Hill. I really hope your senses of Athens have been awakened and enriched. For more information on the things we discussed, see the show notes that accompany this episode of Sense in the City Athens. And please don't forget to follow us on Instagram on Sense in the City Athens and on Facebook on our page Sense in the City World. Or check out our website, which showcases the various cities like Sydney, Dubai, and soon Paris that are presenting podcasts at senseinthe.city.
Hi, I'm David Fuller, Executive Producer of Sense in the City. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to show your support for the team, please follow the links in your podcast app or our website. You can subscribe to bonus content via Patreon, or you can leave a small amount at buymeacoffee.com/sense.